flowing in their veins. Mackie and Judd on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Reckless speculation.
Yeah, it is. That's right. Happy Reckless Speculation Thursday to all who celebrate. This is Mackie and Judd, daily Minnesota sports, entertainment, therapy, speculation. Later in the show, old Macadac here has been compiling lists from around the internet, just random websites like NBAanalysis.net, Sportsnaut, different websites that like to put together trade ideas. And so I'm just going to throw some blockbuster trade ideas at you guys later on in the show. But let's bring our friend in here. He is Darren Doogie Wolfson from the 5 Eyewitness News Sports Department and the Scoop Podcast. Inside information about your favorite Minnesota sports teams. Happy Reckless Speculation Thursday, Doogs.
Always. Let's celebrate, Phil. Happy Reckless Speculation Thursday. Can you throw me one of those trade ideas right now? In case
Sure.
I'm not part of that conversation.
This one's ridiculous. All right. This is an article called 3 Perfect Trade Ideas Involving D'Angelo Russell, and it was from about 3 weeks ago on NBAanalysis.net. Mm-hmm. The Wolves would trade D'Angelo Russell, Jared Vanderbilt, and a 2023 lottery-protected first-round pick to the Brooklyn Nets for Ben Simmons.
Oh, my God. Reckless speculation.
Come on. You're hesitating. You're hesitating.
The Nets have the book on D'Angelo Russell. He did have the good run there. Was it the 18-19 season when they ascended to, the 6th spot in the Eastern Conference? He was a legit all-star that year. That being said, I don't have a sense that the Brooklyn Nets are yearning for more D'Angelo Russell. There is a pathway, Phil, if the Wolves want to, if Tim Connelly wants to, where you just ride this thing out. You keep D'Angelo in his contract year, his true contract year, even though back in September at Wolves Media Day, he hinted at this past year being a contract year. That's because he knows he is extension eligible this summer, but truly, he's entering his contract year. So you could hold on to D'Angelo Russell. You have Pat Beverly on an expiring contract next year. Then you have Malik Beasley with an option. So you don't need to exercise said option for, I guess that would be, the 23-24 season. What I'm alluding to is if Tim Connelly wants to, he can have max cap space 1 year from now, summer of 2023. That doesn't necessarily mean signing a big name free agent, but that offers you so much flexibility in terms of trade talks. Yep. So that would be a pathway. So it's fun to speculate about D'Angelo Russell trade scenarios. I wouldn't be shocked if Tim explores those. This is not Tim Connelly's guy. This is Gerson Rosas's guy. And I'm not quite sure he's got many other guys in the league that love the player. All right. So, can I see Tim Connelly looking to get off of D'Angelo Russell? 100%. But I'm just telling you, one thing he absolutely is going the way is, do I just hold on to him, play this thing out to have all this flexibility July of 2023?
So, Dukes, what's your expectation, too, for Conley when it comes to, because he's a guy who's been in the league, certainly knows the Wolves well from the Nuggets perspective, but he's going to be new here as far as the personalities go and as far as getting to know the players and people. What's your reckless speculation on his moves now? Do you think that he's a thinker and he's going to want to take some time and see how things unfold and then move? Do you think he's going to hit the ground running with trying to make some moves? Because it feels like the new executive in sports now is probably far more patient and measured than they might have been at one time. But do you think that Conley's going to be that, or do you think that we are going to see some moves here made fairly quickly because he does know the roster a bit?
Well, I would say somewhere in the middle. I will be surprised if there are no moves made this summer. Heck, just look at those 3 second-round draft picks. I imagine, I will be surprised if there's not some movement with those 3 picks. Then you have that first-round pick 19. So, just looking at the draft 1 month from now, heck, I think the draft is less than technically a month from now. It's like, what, June 23rd, June 24th, whatever that Thursday is. So we're talking 1 month from now. Like, I expect the Wolves to be active. Also, Judd, the status quo, I was talking with Bobby Marks the other day. I'll put that on my next Scoop podcast. Bobby made the point. I think he's spot on. Status quo probably gets you back into the play-in. Like, this roster still needs work. If the goal next year is to aim higher, is to get higher than the 7 seed to avoid the play-in tournament, work needs to be done. So even though he has 5 years of security, he's got ownership equity that's at least 1%, worth many, many millions of dollars. I think he is going to try to make, some things happen. But as I always say, Judd, it takes 2 to tango. So no guarantees. But like, I imagine, like, he's already hard at work. Like, he was in the gym at Mayo Clinic Square on Tuesday.
Yeah.
We still don't have a date for an introductory news conference. It won't be later today. It won't be tomorrow. So we're looking at next week. In all likelihood, the Timberwolves will hold a press conference next week to formally introduce Tim Connelly. But make no mistake about this. He is already working very, very hard.
Okay, do you think there's going to be a blockbuster Timberwolves trade this summer?
Well, I mean, a blockbuster would be D'Angelo Russell, right? Karl-Anthony Towns.
Well, there's other ways. There's other ways.
Anthony Edwards isn't going anywhere. Like, if they end up moving Malik Beasley, is that a blockbuster?
If they move, like, let's say they package. I'm just perusing through the internet here. Let's say they package Malik Beasley with like a Jared Vanderbilt or something. John Collins is available. Like, it doesn't have to be just D'Angelo Russell, but to what extent do you think they're actually going to make big moves? And I will say this too. I think it was in Gupta's sort of year-end press conference. He even alluded to, listen, all the work we've done to get to here is great, but there's we have to sort of change our vision for this now, and it might be that we have to make some big moves. And he said that before Tim Connelly got hired. But yeah, I'm with you. You can't just look at this and say, all right, let's just run it back again and hope that Anthony Edwards gets a little bit better. This is your chance to maybe make a move or two, but maybe also you want to protect cap space for next summer too. But so what do you think? Do you think there's a high likelihood of a big roster shakeup this summer?
Well, I mean, you could make a move. I mean, you brought up the name John Collins. If you wanted to take on long-term money, you could make a move like that now and just say, okay, that's the move that we would have made summer of 2023. Like, I haven't heard of any specific talks in these first 72 hours. There's a bunch of executives right now in Los Angeles for these agency pro days. Now, maybe Tim Connelly is on his way there. I was told he was not at the Bill Duffy agency pro day yesterday. That was Kendall Brown, the Cottage Grove native from Baylor. Some other good players on the court. Although we can debate, like, I don't know how much you're gleaning when these guys are dribbling against a chair or, some pickup player. There's very little resistance offered on the defensive end, right? But it's a chance for all these executives to gather in Los Angeles. They are in the gym, so they're watching these players work out, these draft prospects. But inevitably, trade talk happens. You are in the same vicinity. You are in the same location, right? Like, you can have face-to-face dialogue. So I'll be curious to hear if Tim Connelly makes his way out there. I know right now the Wolves have assistant GM Joe Branch out there. They have personnel director Zarko Durasic out there. They have new guy Steve Sr. from the Memphis Grizzlies, who they just hired. Sachin Gupta made that hire a couple weeks ago. I forget what his exact title is. He might have the title of assistant general manager. They have multiple assistant general managers. I did not hear the name Sachin Gupta being out in Los Angeles. So that to me is interesting. Now, I will follow up on that. Maybe he's heading out today or tomorrow. There were 2 agency pro days yesterday. I've got the schedule somewhere. In fact, see if I can multitask here. So there's a chance he will still head out there. Here we go. So there was one. The California pro days will take place at various locations in the LA and Santa Barbara areas. Well, yeah, there's a couple next week. Well, yeah, this week. Wednesday, May 25th through Friday, May 27th. All right, so maybe it's only through tomorrow. Sorry, I'm looking at this. I'm trying to do 2 things at once.
No, do your thing. That's so good.
Yeah, so it's yesterday. There's some more today. and at least one agency I think has one tomorrow. But the fact that Gupta wasn't spotted there yesterday, if it's only 3 days, like I don't know what the point would be to go out there today. What I'm getting at here is the Wolves are pushing hard to keep Sachin Gupta. That is something I've talked about going back many days. So that should not be a surprise to viewers and listeners right now. I still think there's some stuff up in the air, though, whether Sachin wants to remain on board. In a perfect world, Sachin Gupta is working for the Wolves this upcoming season. They want him. They absolutely want him. I imagine that means giving him a nice bump in pay, but he still has some things that he needs to sort out. It has to be a weird time for Sachin Gupta. And by the way, before I let you hop in there, Judd, apologies. I'm aware of, for sure, Tim having interest in bringing in somebody that if he came here, he's not coming here to be the number 3 guy. Like if he can get this guy out of his current location, he'd be the number 2 guy here. It's one of his close friends that like NBA people would be like, wow, that's an unbelievable hire. I think a lot of fans would probably have to Google his name. Like unless you have intimate knowledge of front offices across the league, you probably wouldn't know the name. But NBA people would be like, whoa, that is an unreal hire to bring that guy in as your number 2. Right? So I'm sure Sachin, if I've heard that steam.
Reckless.
Yeah, well, the reckless would be me naming the name. I won't do that. The guy
You didn't do that last time and you regretted it. Are you sure you don't want to this time? Are you sure?
Are
you sure?
Don't get
Connelly.
beat. Don't get beat on this scoop.
I know.
Don't get beat.
It gets aggregated. What's the worst that happens? It's forgotten within a day.
Give us one initial.
Right now.
Give us one initial.
A, Eastern Conference. Okay. How about that? So that eliminates half the team.
This counts. We can reference this
and let's just
back.
say the guy is pretty darn busy right now. I mean, we have the draft in less than a month, but I'm just telling you, the guy is very, very busy right this second.
God damn.
All right, if I may, the question I was going to ask was this: Are there any head jobs that Gupta could be up for now, or jobs that could be? Because I would guess that the one thing that might intrigue him is if a team looks at what he did or didn't do, but like the Wolves had success and says, "Hey, that guy clearly can lead a franchise. I'd like him to lead my franchise." Could that be a component recklessly speculating in what's going to take some time for him to work through?
Well, unfortunately, there's not a job open. Last time I checked, Mitch Kupchak is being retained in Charlotte. The Nets are making some changes with their front office. I still wonder about the Rockets. I mean, Sachin this time last year was pretty much out the door on his way to join his buddy Stone with the Rockets. So would he go to Houston to be the number 2? But there's not a number 1 job open right this second. Mm-hmm. I think it's when, not if, Judd. He earns a number 1 job, legitimately earns a 1 job. I mean, he's not even, maybe he just turned 40, but we're not talking about an old man. So at some point, he's going to get that chance, but that job just isn't out there. But like, I think it would be much easier to go to Houston to be the number 2 than to stay here knowing that you got bypassed. Like, I still go back to that word weird. Like, it has to be. Like, the news broke on Monday as the Wolves are interviewing a bunch of draft prospects. So they had a bunch of guys in on Monday. They had some draft prospects in on Tuesday as well, including J.D. Davison of Alabama. That was the workout that Tim Connelly attended. But on Monday, as the news officially broke, now maybe Gupta mentally was prepared that Connelly was going to accept. But when the news broke that he officially accepted the job, like, Gupta's in these interviews with these draft prospects. It had to be awkward. It had to be. And I know a number of people who have tried to touch base with Sachin. There hasn't been luck on that front. I just think if it was somewhat even kumbaya, hey, I'm in a good spot, I think Gupta would have returned some of these text messages, some of these phone calls from, hey, not only me, but from many others, and it just hasn't happened.
But I mean,
so that's why my tentacles are out. Maybe it is reckless speculation. So maybe I'll feed into the theme of this segment.
Reckless speculation.
Like, I just think Sachin, knowing him a little bit, Like, I think he would have responded in some form to say, I'm in a good spot, all is well. And I haven't heard that from a bunch of people that have tried to touch base with him. So that's why I think, again, think, not know, but think that he is still sorting through his situation.
Yeah, and you know what? And I think this is just collateral damage. It's such a Minnesota thing for us to sit here and say, oh man, I really feel he deserves it, feel bad, this, that. The Timberwolves' new ownership group are sharks, okay? I mean, Alex Rodriguez, say what you want about the steroid stuff. Alex Rodriguez and Mark Lowry are sharks in their professions, in their business dealings. They don't care about, I mean, I'm not going to say they don't care about Sachin Gupta's feelings, but like they went big game hunting. Dude, you've been alluding to this for months. And so if going and getting one of the 5 or 6 most respected POBOs in the NBA and doubling his salary in the most shark move ever made in Timberwolves front office history, basically, if the collateral damage to that is, oh, Sachin Gupta is going to be kind of ticked and he might leave, that sucks, and I don't want Gupta to leave because I think he brings a ton of value to the organization, but you just have to live with it, I think. I don't think you can dwell on it.
Oh, 100%. They hired an established rock star.
Yep.
I think Gupta has a chance to be a rock star, but he's not a rock star yet. Any objective list, Phil, I don't know about top 5 or 6, but certainly top 10. If you objectively made a top 10 list of final decision makers in the NBA, undoubtedly Tim Connelly would be on that list. It was a shark-esque move. To offer him ownership equity, I'm not saying that's unheard of, but that's really, really rare. Like, Pat Riley has some sliver of ownership down in Miami. Masai up in Toronto, the belief is he's got something as well. I was catching up with Ryan McDonough, the former Suns GM, the other day. I'll have that conversation on my next Scoop podcast. He made reference to that. So it's not completely unheard of. But, like, I'm aware, Phil, I brought this up with Judd on Tuesday, but I'll bring it up with you now in the conversation. I'm aware of some NBA people upset by the Wolves doing this. Imagine if you are an owner and you have a rock star president of operations whose contract maybe is up in the next year or 2. Well, guess what? That president, in all likelihood, is going to say, look, Tim Connelly got 1% ownership in Minnesota. For me to stay here, you need to offer me 1% ownership. So I'm just telling you, I know some NBA people who aren't real happy right now, but the Wolves did everything within the rules. This was not illegal, what the Wolves did. So incredibly shrewd move. You're right. They are sharks. They are great. If you're a Wolves fan, you should be very excited by Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez's presence.
So, Dukes, Cat, we found out a couple days ago, 3rd team All-NBA makes him eligible now for what, the max extension. Seems like a given that it's going to happen. Are there any potential roadblocks there? And I guess I asked that especially because he did get the injections that we found out about, which I think Phil made the point yesterday that when the extension would start, Cat would be 29, so he would not exactly be young as far as the NBA career goes. Would there be any recklessly speculating potential roadblocks in the way of Cat receiving this from the Wolves?
I don't see any roadblocks. It's a no-brainer. 4 years, nearly $211 million, a little shy of that. So we're talking he's got 2 years left on his current contract. The 4-year extension then would be tacked on to the end of the 2. So you'd have him under team control for 6 more seasons. Mm-hmm. Seasons 4, 5, and 6, he would be making north of $50 million. Now, keep in mind, though, the cap is expected to go way up, right? Yeah. So $50 million sounds like a lot right this second. In 4 years, not so much. Yes, it's a good amount, but it won't be as much when the cap keeps going up, up, up. Now, the Wolves don't have to give him all that. Like, they could try to negotiate a lesser number. They could offer him 180, 185, 190, not go all the way to 211. But, like, I don't think you want to ruffle those feathers. I don't think that's a path that you want to take.
You got to do
give him the supermax, because in my mind, if you had to 3-4 years from now, if you had to trade him, you know, barring his body completely breaking down, I still think in 3 or 4 years, if you had to, it would be a contract you could move.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I think our audience.
I don't think it's
knows
tough,
how
Phil. I think you give him the supermax. Like,
No, I agree with that.
I don't
I'm
think
saying
it's tough. I really don't.
I'm saying what's tough is once you have, like, you have to do it. I totally agree. But once you do it, and there's going to be some other max contracts, super max contracts here too, but he then becomes one of the 5 or 6 highest paid players in the NBA starting in 2 years from now, depending on how some other contracts shake out. Does he give you that level of production in a salary cap, luxury cap league? And in some ways in the regular season, the answer is yes. You could find some offensive efficiency stats that say yes. But when he ghosts 3 or 4 of your 7 playoff play-in games and actively derails your chances to win, it's hard to justify. Not to mention a 7-footer already having these obscure, plasma procedures and knee problems and stuff. I mean, you're signing him until he's about 33 years old. So you have to do it, but there's some things that need to be sort of ironed out or kept an eye on, I think, with Cat over the next 2 years before that supermax would even kick in, Doogie.
Yes, that is plenty fair. Those are all valid questions, but you still would have flexibility to make other moves. What we wonder about, even though, we do wonder about Mark and Alex's finances, right? There are still those questions out there. It's not like they own 51% of the Wolves right this second. Right now, they're still at, 20%, soon to have another 20%. Then the plan still remains, until I hear otherwise, for them to take over as majority owners December of 2023. But even though those questions exist, was it you, Phil, that just referenced him in terms of, some comparison to Mark Cuban? Or maybe Judd's done that. Judd's done that in some text messages with me. Heck, are Mark and Alex willing to pay the luxury tax at some point? Right? Now, I don't think you do it for a non-playoff team, but if the Wolves can maintain this level of consistency with most of this core, probably not D'Angelo Russell, but certainly Anthony Edwards, I still think Jaden McDaniels has a chance to be that third guy in a big three. That's how big a fan I am of Jaden McDaniels.
Boy, and
but even if he's the number 4, even if
Yeah.
he's the number 4 guy, and you come up with another, 3, you've got Ant, you've got Cat.
Right.
Like, I wonder if at some point Mark and Alex say, you know what? Like, let's go into the luxury tax. We're fine with that.
Yeah. Dex, let's Judd just texted us for a topic change. This is how we communicate topic changes. Dex, go read the text and then change the topic here. Go ahead. I'll let you
got
take
it.
this.
You got
Okay,
it.
go
All
ahead.
right.
Okay.
We got a Reckless speculation.
Interesting
little note here from the Ottawa Senators over the, or I think it was tweeted out yesterday, Doogie, that they are interested in potentially trading that 7th overall pick for an established player. And also Kevin Fiala is also, his name's been bandied about as well on the trade rumor side. Have you heard anything on the Wild's trade front on what they want to do this summer? Obviously a very interesting offseason for Bill Guerin ahead with those buyouts hitting and obviously Fiala having a disappointing season. Have you heard any reckless speculation, or what is your gut telling you what Bill Guerin could do this summer?
Well, I mean, something is coming. I think we all know that just based on looking at their salary cap chart. Judd, I'll defer to you for more intimate knowledge of the Ottawa Senators thinking, but it's hard for me to believe that they would give up pick 7 for Matt Dumba. I would think that they would aim higher, a defenseman that's got more term left on his contract, maybe a defenseman with not so much recent injury history. I have a hard time believing, plus Matt Dumba does have some no-move protection. I just have a hard time seeing that being a trade that Ottawa says, here, Minnesota, take number 7, give us Matt Dumba.
Yeah, I think the potential for the trade would probably be if the Wild could convince the Senators to take Fiala. Fiala would probably have to agree to sign an extension at that time to ensure that he would stay with the Sens for the potential long term. And then I would guess if you're the Wild, you might have to give them one more chip. It wouldn't have to be huge. But, it was a very interesting philosophy that Guerin took when he went on with Dan Barreiro last week of getting his backup big time when asked about Dumba potentially being traded. And I think it was an interesting move because fans will say, well, he obviously loves him. In fact, I saw a bunch of tweets. He's not going anywhere. Matt Dumba's here to stay. What Guerin did is genius. What Bill Guerin basically did is say, I will not trade Matthew Dumba. I will never be moving on. And teams were like, oh, I wonder why he said that. I think we'll call about Dumba. So, and plus the culture, Dukes, as you know of that sport is to defend your teammates and your players and then trade them. Like that's how it works. But I find it. I think Fiala's gone though. I just think from a salary cap standpoint, this team's about to go into 3 years of salary cap hell. I think he's traded. I think the question becomes where and what can you get back for him. And I do believe too the intriguing thing about this entire discussion is this. The Wild took their shot. It fell short, woefully short, unfortunately. But there is now some room to sort of regroup, right? And to get draft picks and to try and build. So essentially, I think the next real shot is going to be realistically when they're coming out of cap hell, if they position themselves right then to have a group of players led by Kaprizov that can make a run. But yeah, it's going to be, there's no question just from a salary cap standpoint, they're going to have to make moves.
Yes, and if I had to bet, I do think it's Fiala that will be moving on. Wherever he moves on to, I imagine that team would have some dialogue with his representation because, you would want to lock him up for more than him entering his unrestricted free agency year. So you'd want to have some control if you're giving up a decent amount to get Fiala. I'll tell you another thing. You bring up shot. How about the indirect shots by Bill Guerin at Zach Parise and Ryan Suter? That's clear as day right now. I think a lot of people knew. We've talked about this before, but that Bill just viewed, I think more so Ryan than Zach, but certainly both of them, that those two they destroyed the locker room. And I can tell you, as much as the hell will be the next 3 years for the Wild in terms of their salary cap situation, Bill Guerin would do those buyouts every time again. There is no regret. I'm just telling you from his standpoint, zero regret in buying out Suter and Parise.
Yeah.
Bill also said importantly though, and this I think is the key to the entire thing. He also said, let's not put it all on those two because there were some definite other players who are now gone who might have seemed like the greatest guys on the face of the earth. Oh my God, this guy's a great community guy that were pains in the asses. In fact, you know what the parallel is? The parallel is this: the Twins clubhouse, 2021. Josh Donaldson was a problem, okay? But from trying to sniff around a bit, I have found out a lot more problems. Like Josh was the poster child for, well, this guy's an a-hole. But it turns out that there were a lot of other variables in the chemistry, especially when you have Rocco who likes to defer things that didn't work. So like this is the whole thing about where people don't put enough, I don't think, in how clubhouses and locker rooms function. Like I think we all think, well, I mean, if you look at the advanced metrics, that's going to tell you that helps, right, Phil? But that's not the entire thing.
Yeah.
Well, but like look at Brian Cashman. Trust me, Brian Cashman in New York is well aware that Josh Donaldson is a pain in the butt, that he can be a clubhouse cancer. But Cashman looked at it and said, you know what? Like, I've got the right mix of guys where he's not going to be a complete a-hole. Right? Even though we've seen, with the Tim Anderson situation, I'm sure Aaron Judge and others they didn't want anything to do with that. But,
yeah, dude.
Josh Donaldson's, antics reared their ugly head, right, in that situation. But, so, it depends, right? Like some GMs just might say, you know what, I don't care. I'm aware that the guy is, but I'll take the player. We'll deal with the fallout. Yeah. But yeah, there is something to be said about 2021 Twins clubhouse, and definitely something to be said, at least in Bill Guerin's mind, with the Wild's locker room. And yes, beyond Parise and Suter. I think some people can figure out who you were alluding to, community guy and all that. So yes. Yeah.
All right, Dukes, empty the scoop bag here. What else do you got here on this Reckless Speculation Thursday?
So the Wolves interviewed 20 draft prospects in Chicago at the Combine last week. I put out some names on Twitter, some on one of these segments, but two names I did not mention. Keegan Murray of Iowa, Jeremy Sohan of Baylor. To me, what's interesting, both guys in all likelihood aren't touching pick 19. Like, I think Murray goes top 10. I think Sohan goes shortly thereafter, maybe as high as 8 or 9. But I think Sohan is definitely off the board by pick 12 or pick 13. So just interesting, something to keep an eye on if the Wolves ever explore moving up in the draft. But then again, Tim Connelly was not part of those interviews, so the landscape has changed in some regard. The Twins are in Toronto next week. I do not expect the Twins to have every player available. What I'm getting at is they do not have a 100% vaccination rate. Yeah. Now, I can debate. To me, it's an unfair advantage. Not that the Blue Jays had much to do with it, if anything to do with it, but, the Canadian government giving the Blue Jays this distinct advantage that certain players can't play in games in Toronto. So I guess that's another part of the conversation. But bottom line, do not expect the Twins to have their full complement of guys next Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for those 3 games in Toronto.
Interesting. So can they
Speculation.
So they just have to play shorthanded? Is that how that works? Or what's
what? I need to look at that. Can you put a guy on some sort of reserved list, then bring up another guy?
He's got a sore shoulder.
I don't know. I need to look into that. But when looking at their current 26-man roster, the roster they will have for tonight's game against the Royals, that 26-man roster will not be the same available roster for those 3 games in Toronto next week. One other Twins note, minor leaguer Spencer Steer is now up in St. Paul, 3rd-round pick out of Oregon in 2019. I've had a couple people tell me, including a scout friend of mine, he's got a lot of David Fletcher in him. Think about Fletcher from the Angels, who I think might be hurt right now, but really good player. Now, keep an eye. I think it's when, not if. I mean, now that he's up in St. Paul, not that every Saint makes it to the Twins, but remember the name Spencer Steer. I think he has a future in the big leagues.
Okay. Doogie, I'm going to tell you here, this is great stuff, but you're going to want to listen to the second half of this episode because I've been trying to organize this and multitask here, but we've got some great reckless trade ideas that some websites are pitching for the Timberwolves. One of them, I will say, and we will get to it here in a moment for the podcast audience, but one of them, on the surface, you would say, no. And then after thinking for 10 seconds, you might say, huh, okay. Interesting. Involving a future Hall of Fame player. I'll just leave it at that. And Doogie, I'm teasing it for Doogie. You'll have to go back and listen later.